You'll see, yeah. All right, good afternoon. Sorry, we're going to try to do this quickly but efficiently. I will be joined in a short while by Ramiz Alakbarov, the director of UNFPA's Policy and Strategy Division, who is here to brief you on the UNFPA State of the World Population Report 2019. After that, around 12:30, there'll be a joint press briefing by the President of the General Assembly, María Fernanda Espinosa Garcés, and the Director General of the International Labour Organization, Guy Ryder, and they will be here to brief you on the high-level meeting to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the ILO. And at 2 p.m., there'll be a briefing by Ambassador Samuel Moncada, the Permanent Representative of Venezuela to these United Nations. As you will have seen, the Secretary General attended this morning's meeting on Venezuela, in which Council members heard a briefing from the Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lowcock. After that, the Secretary General met with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence. And the Secretary General will be returning to the Security Council this afternoon at 3 p.m., where he will speak on, in close consultations, on Libya following his travels to Libya. Staying on Libya, I can tell you that the Secretary General continues to follow closely the situation in that country. The Secretary General remains very concerned about the continued fighting in and around Tripoli, where clashes are reportedly intensifying with increased use of artillery and airstrikes. He reminds all parties of their obligations under international humanitarian law and international human rights law to ensure the safety of all civilians. The special representative of the Secretary General and his leadership team, the leadership team from the UN mission in Libya, remain in Tripoli and continue to engage in talks with local and international interlocutors in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Mr. Salameh, the head of the mission, met today with the president of the Presidency Council, Fayez Sarraj, and discussed the best way the UN can support Libya and its people at this critical period. You'll have seen Mr. Salameh's statement yesterday reiterating his commitment to convene the national conference as soon as possible, but that the security conditions need to be in place. The UN mission is working to address the humanitarian situation, including the need for emergency services to access those injured and civilians trapped in conflict areas. Our colleagues at the International Organization for Migration say further escalation of violence in and around Tripoli has led to an upsurge in displacement, with over 5,800 people having fled their homes. Many Libyans and detained refugees and migrants are currently unable to flee the violence due to their proximity to the conflict, according to the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. The humanitarian community is extremely concerned by the use of explosive weapons in densely inhabited areas and continue to call on parties to the conflict to abide by their obligations under international law and to take all feasible precautions to spare civilians infrastructure, including school, medical facilities, and power stations. And just to head back to Venezuela for a moment, this morning the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Mark Lowcock, told Security Council members that there is a very real humanitarian problem in Venezuela with some 7 million people in need of humanitarian assistance, and that is 25% of the population. The joint UNHCR-IOM Special Representative for Venezuelan refugees and migrants, Eduardo Stein, also addressed the Council and stressed that Venezuelans continue to move across the region and that it is in the best interest of receiving countries to avoid situations where Venezuelans remain undocumented, invisible, and without access to basic rights. Mr. Stein called for more support for countries employing an open-door policies and for more international cooperation resources for just these humanitarian efforts. And earlier today, the Secretary General spoke at the ceremony marking the 100th anniversary of the International Labour Organization, and he said, despite being among the oldest member of the UN family, the ILO remains to this day one of the most unique gathering places of the international system. In recent years, the Secretary General said the ILO has been out front in recognizing the need to build a fair globalization that expands opportunities, reduces inequalities, and answers people's demands for support for decent work, a concept which itself is firmly embedded in the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. The Secretary General added that let us make the most of this pivotal anniversary to renew our collective commitment to international cooperation, to peace, and to social justice. His remarks are with you. Turning to Syria, we welcome all efforts to find durable solutions for the people of Rukban in southeast Syria along the border with Jordan, in line with the results of the survey carried out by the UN and the Syrian Arab Red Crescent in February. It says that 95% of the people surveyed expressed a desire to leave, but also had expressed protection concerns. Between the 23rd of March and April 10th, a total of 1,726 people reportedly exited Rukban camp for collective shelters in and around homes. The UN is providing limited support to the evacuees through the Red Crescent, including food, nutrition, water, hygiene kits, and medical services. The UN has not been granted access to shelters. It reiterates its willingness to engage more directly if granted full access to shelters, the areas of origin and destination, and to displace people on their way to homes. Pending the realization of durable solution for the population of Rukban, the UN also continues to strongly advocate for additional assistance to be provided. Conditions for the approximately 40,000 women, children, and men at Rukban are dire. And just want to flag that the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, was wrapping up a 5-day visit to Mexico. She praised Mexico's new government for its willingness to put human rights at its center and reiterated her office's readiness to support the policy change. While in Mexico, the High Commissioner also called for the strengthening of the protection mechanism for human rights defenders and journalists. And on a related note that is related to journalists, I wanted to flag that following the recommendation by the International Jury of Media Professionals, the Reuters journalists Kyaw So-u and Hua Lone of Myanmar will share this year's UNESCO's Guillermo Cano Press Freedom Prize. As you know, the two journalists are serving 7-year prison sentences. At the time of their arrest in December 2017, they were reporting on the alleged human rights violations in Myanmar's Rakhine state. The choice of these two journalists pays tribute to their courage, resistance, and commitment to freedom of expression. The prize recognizes outstanding contributions to the defense and promotion of press freedom, especially in the face of danger. We congratulate them, and more information on the UNESCO website. And on Myanmar, humanitarian colleagues tell us that as the fighting continues in Rakhine and Chin states, civilians are caught in the crossfire, are being killed and injured. They're also concerned by reported use of indiscriminate and heavy weapons in populated areas. At least 26,000 people from across Rakhine and Chin state have been forced to flee their homes. Access restrictions across Rakhine have limited or cut off support and services to some 95,000 people. The longer this continues, the more at risk these already fragile and in-need communities across the state become. The UN calls on all parties to the conflict to comply with their obligations under international human rights law, international humanitarian law, to find a peaceful solution. I wanted to flag that at 3 p.m. today in conference room 12, the UN Development Program and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, otherwise known as the OECD, will hold an event to present a new report by the OECD on the challenges facing the middle class. The report, entitled Under Pressure, the Squeezed Middle Class, is published today, highlights how middle-class households feel left behind and are questioning the benefits of globalization. In many countries, middle incomes have grown less than average incomes, and in some countries, they've not grown at all. OECD Secretary General Angel Gurria will present the report with Luis Felipe Lopez Calva, UNDP's Assistant Secretary General for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we say muchas gracias to our friends in Madrid, as Spain has paid its regular budget dues in full, and not a small amount, I might add. And our honor roll is up to 82. But if you're the only one who plays, it's like the lottery. You win. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I'd like to know the Secretary General's reaction to Vice President Pence's call for the UN to take a more active role relating to the recognition of the interim president in lieu of Maduro, and also whether this came up during the discussions he had with the vice president, and also his response to the call, I believe, by Ms. Page from Johns Hopkins for the Secretary General specifically to call what's going on in a complex humanitarian crisis and to take some concrete steps to investigate.
On your first part, as we've been saying since this question came up, the issue of credentials and who recognizes delegations, who recognizes the people who represent states here is one that is dealt with by the Credentials Committee of the General Assembly. It is not one that involves the Secretary General in any way. The reaction, and I think as the Vice President said, I think he mentioned it himself. It did come up in the conversation that the Vice President himself said he raised it in the conversation with the Secretary General, which the bilateral, in fact, is not surprising, focused on Venezuela. As for the response to Ms. Page, I would have you reread Mr. Lowcock's own remarks to the Council, in which he outlined all the ways the United Nations is moving forward on trying to increase humanitarian assistance to the people of Venezuela.
I think, if I heard her correctly, I think she was asking for more personal, direct involvement by the Secretary General, given his
I think the
Secretary
Secretary General has been, I think, very much personally involved in the UN's handling of Venezuela. Masood, and then.
Thank you. Yeah, on Yemen, which the question which you've been asking you over and over again, today the United Nations officials have again said that the situation in Yemen continues to be catastrophic, to say the least. Question again arises, has the Secretary General been able to talk to the Saudi authorities?
I mean, you ask the same question every day, and rightfully so, because I think we need to underscore the horrendous situation in which the civilians of Yemen are placed. The Secretary General, either directly or through his efforts, through the efforts of Martin Griffiths, through the efforts of Lise Grande, his humanitarian representative on the ground, yes, are doing whatever they humanly can to try to bring the parties together, to find a political way forward, and to bring humanitarian assistance to the people of Yemen. The solution is for the fighting to stop, and that's where our work has been focusing. Yes, go ahead.
On Venezuela, two issues. In the same subject regarding the ambassador of Venezuela in the United Nations, from your point of view, are you still considering Mr. Moncada to be a representative of Venezuela?
From our point of view, the member states are the ones who have the power over the credentials. We are dealing with the current permanent representative. And as again, the issue is for the if there is a challenge, the issue is for the member states themselves to decide. On
Venezuela, also, the Vice President Pence talked about humanitarian aid that the U.S. provided or trying to provide to Venezuelans. Did the UN get any money that Mr. Pence is talking about? Or and can you put us more on the picture regarding the UN, the aid that the UN is giving to Venezuelans?
Well, on what we're doing in Venezuela, I think Mr. Lowcock gave a pretty granular presentation in terms of numbers of staff and where we're working, and his presentation is the most up-to-date presentation of what we're doing in Yemen. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry.
The U.S. was talking about providing $200 million for aid. They did not say that to the UN, but did the UN get any U.S. money?
I'll have to check on the funding issue.
Thank you.
Yes, and then we'll go to our guest.
Thanks, Stéphane. Actually, I want to know, is there any talks between the UN and its organizations, between the UN and the current government of the Venezuela? And did the government of the Venezuela propose any solution on the crisis in the country?
Well, I mean, we are in touch with the government of Venezuela. We're in touch with other institutions in Venezuela, I think as Mr. Lowcock said, and we will continue that dialogue. Okay. Please, we really have literally 5 minutes. I'm sorry. We're joined very briefly by Ramiz Alakbarov, the director of UNFPA's Policy and Strategy Division, to brief you on the state of the world population. Please.
Thank you very much for being here, and I'm very happy today to launch the UNFPA anniversary edition of our report, Unfinished Business, State of the World Population 2019. This year we're marking 25th anniversary of the implementation of the Program of Action of International Conference on Population and Development. It is also the 50th anniversary of the United Nations Population Fund. And this report provides an overview of a long journey which the fund and the world have gone in the last 50 years from the establishment of the fund, and is specifically talking about the 25 years progress and implementation of the Cairo Program of Action. The realities are interesting. The report contains interesting data and trends about the fertility and the use of modern methods of contraception and the journey which the women have made throughout the world in ensuring their universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights. The new realities are that more and better methods of contraception since 1960 have empowered billions of women to control their own fertility and future. In the pursuit of rights and choices, women have faced social and economic barriers every step of the way, and overcoming these barriers was only possible because of governments, international organizations, civil society, and activists joining forces together to make it happen. So we are talking about a considerable progress which has been made. The global contraceptive prevalence rate have changed from 24 in 1969 to 58 in 2019. And the percent of the child marriage around the world, meaning the girls worldwide who are married at the age before the age of 18, has considerably decreased. However, there's still more progress which needs to be made, and all that information is provided in the report. United Nations Population Fund this year will be conducting its landmark conference in Nairobi. We are calling it in Nairobi Summit. It will be to celebrate the 25 years of UNFPA, of ICPD and UNFPA at 50. The objectives of the institution and our strategic vision is to assure that there is a zero unmet need for contraception. There is zero maternal deaths and zero gender-based violence and practices that harm women and girls around the world. And we're fostering and continuing to champion the global action to achieve these objectives. For the sake of time, I will stop my intervention here and will answer any question which may be. I know today was very condensed day.
Thank you very much for understanding. We're being squeezed in all directions. So
And
we have time for 2 quick questions before we turn it over to the PGA and the Director General of the ILO. Yes, please.
Hi, Matthias Ask with TV2 Norway. Thank you for the briefing. I was wondering, I know that the Trump administration has cut funding to the UNFPA, and I was wondering, how does that affected your work and your ability to carry out your work in the last couple of years?
Thank you for your question. Millions of women and girls around the world have been not receiving required services, reproductive health services, essential mother and child health prevention services, and this is very, very regrettable that we do not receive the funding. We would like to express at this particular juncture thanks to every government and every contributor to UNFPA who have been trying to support us through this period, but fundamentally the effect is in the reduction of the access to essential reproductive health services for millions of women around the world.
Thank you. Ramiz, thank you very much.
And for the sake of time, we brought the reports. The copies of the report are available. They're here in the room, so please avail yourself. Thank you so much.